We'll call the meeting to order. Today is Thursday, May 23rd. This is the Budget Committee. I'm here. Councilmember Moreno, Councilmember Green are here. Councilmember Moreno moves for approval of the Budget Committee meeting minutes, which is seconded by Councilmember Green. We are all in favor. So with that, we will get to these topics on procurement and finance, which are really important issues. I know sometimes it's easy to get bogged down internally, but we also know how important it is to make sure that things are moving as they should be through public process. So, Mr. Meyer, do you want to come forward, please? Absolutely. And Ms. Samuel. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, look, I think we just wanted to talk because we want to make sure we understand, and the public understands, I think, as Councilmember Green so frequently says, how procurement and payment ought to work and how we make sure that it is being facilitated in the best way possible. Obviously, we know that there's certain rules that are meant to make sure the process is fair, that it's open, that people understand what's going on. But at the same time, the feedback that we feel like we're hearing is that things get bogged down at certain points along the way, and we want to remove those barriers to make it as quickly as possible. So I guess if we could just start at the top, let's just assume the council allocates money at June 1 for something to happen, for a service. So an RFP has to be put out for that to happen. In theory, how long should it take from the time the money's been allocated, June 1, to being able to get that service on the street? I mean, can you walk us through that, Mr. Meyer?
Sure. So obviously start with the department who's getting the funds in developing the scope of service.
Right.
That step can take any amount of time depending on whether the department is reusing potentially a scope that they have developed before, because it might be for services that they procured before, or if it's something new that they've never done. Depends on the expertise of the department on putting the scope together. But I have no amount of time to share with you because I really start with the department.
Okay. Can I ask a question now? Sure. In fairness? So you're making a good point. The department has to develop the scope. Is somebody who's the department head responsible for saying the money's now been allocated June 1 and now we're at July 31 and nothing has happened? Is it the CAO? I mean, who is trying to make sure every piece is being moved on to get to the next step?
My response would be the department head.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Okay. So, all right. So let's just say an ordinary course of scope, I would think, would be between 30 to 45 days. I mean, it doesn't seem like if you have a contract for something that is routine. Well, go ahead.
Let's start with, I'm new to this.
Right.
And I'm learning. So what we're doing now is auditing the process.
Right.
So I think to Julian's point, it is important for the department because it's a partnership. It's not just procurement.
Right.
It's the department, it's procurement, it's the law department. We have several stakeholders in this process, along with the approvers along the way.
Right.
I think it has been the assumption that procurement is centralized, but it is actually initiated by the department.
Right.
So they are the owner of this. What procurement's role is the administrator. Mm-hmm. We help facilitate getting the process completed. So the department does have responsibility in making sure that things are actually moving along. Too, we all work together.
Right.
So what we've been doing is trying to identify the gaps in the process. Where does it stall? Can we look at those processes to see exactly how we change that, compress those, and make it more efficient? So to your point, we are looking at where and how we can make this process more efficient.
Okay, so, but I guess, let's just start, I just want to try and do it as a timeline, because that's the only way I really know how to keep it logical. So, the money's allocated, it's there. All right, so who is sitting on top of the department head saying, hey, this thing is an essential city service, and it's one that you regularly do, so we're now at day 60 and there's been no action. How come you haven't contacted procurement yet to start the RFP process?
To start, or has the process initiated in your example?
Yeah,
To, s-
go ahead.
to start?
To start, yeah. Because didn't you say, I want to make sure I understand correctly, Mr. Meyer, what you're saying is the scope has to be developed first.
Right.
You need to know the extent of the services, what's going on. So let's just say, in this case, the city's going to go clean catch basins, all right? Something that's been near and dear to all of our hearts. All right, so money's allocated June 1 to clean catch basin. The scope is we have, I'm going to make a number less than what the contract was for. We have $1 million to clean catch basins, and as much is done. We're on day 60, and you still don't, you procurement, not Mr. Meyer, procurement doesn't have anything from Department of Public Works yet. What facilitates that next step to saying, hey, the council or the administration, working with the council, allocated this money, we need to move to the next step?
So what we've recently done, and I think really if it's a priority for the department would push it, certainly to get that out the door and the project started. But what I've recommended to procurement is to proactively reach out to their assigned departments to see what's next. What do you have, that's ready to be staged to move into the process? So Julianne can explain, that particular action.
Yeah, so my office, we have staff members that handle procurement, are buyers/purchasing agents, and they are assigned to various departments, whom they try to meet with them on a regular basis. When I say meeting, could be just a phone call, depending on the volume of work, but we try to get our buyers to have visibility in what the department is working on, because until it comes to us, we don't know what they have, what they're working on, what they're preparing. And so those meetings that we facilitate between buyers and a representative of the departments to find out what are you working on, what's coming our way. That we may need to guide you to do it the right way, but as well as managing our workload of what is coming our way to make sure we put it out when the department wants to.
Right, because now the issue is we've allocated money to DPW, mosquito control, code enforcement. There's 13 different departments who then all of a sudden at one time say, I'm ready to put out an RFP. Mm-hmm. So how does procurement decide this is the order? Is it first come, first serve?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So whoever gets to you first.
Yeah, my buyers, my staff member may have like 4, 5, 6 departments that they handle, which is to first come, first serve basis. Unless, obviously, as they inform during those regular meetings, which that's what we want to be aware of, so that they can manage that first come, first serve practice.
All right. Well, let me ask this, and I know Councilmember Moreno wants to chime in. So first come, first serve, but not all contracts are equal too. So somebody may have a contract for $25,000 that needs to go through, and then somebody has a $10 million one. The $10 million one's going to be a bigger lift than the $25,000 one. So it's just based on first come, first serve, not based on amount or severity to whoever gets to you first.
Unless there are those early conversations, so we know that a $10 million is coming, and that my buyer who may know that there's $25,000 coming, they can manage that depending on what information we get in advance.
All right. I lied, Councilmember. I have one more question. When the council passes its budget, and that, for example, we allocate, we'll make this up, another $1 million for catch basins, is procurement told The council has now allocated this extra money, and so these 10 items should be on procurement's radar because there's additional funds ready, and we know that legal services, catch basin cleaning, whatever else is on the horizon. Do you get a list that tells you this is coming?
I mean, I don't, even though I monitor obviously budget hearings and understanding what's coming our way,
Right.
but it's really at the level of the buyer with their representative to kind of see where this is coming to them and how it's planned.
Right, okay. I mean, I'm going to, Councilmember Moreno.
My question's a little bit diverting off of where you're at.
That's
So
fine.
is that all right? Okay. So my question has to do with when respondents for different RFPs come in, who is in charge of figuring out if the forms filled out, if they are correct or not? Who makes those determinations? Is that the departments? Is that your office? Like, who's in charge of
My
that?
office.
It's your office. And what are kind of the guidelines, for some of these forms that are filled out on whether or not they can move forward or not? And are there ever times when there are some minor little errors where a respondent maybe just called and said, like, hey, you forgot to put a comma here, or you forgot to check a box? Like, how does that work?
So that stage that you call it's like the responsiveness check. Irrespective of the solicitation that we release for a department, this is when we get proposals after the deadline, that's the first stage that you're describing, the responsiveness check, which is done primarily by my department, even though if it involves supply diversity, that's information that the Office of Supply Diversity will verify. We don't have that expertise or knowledge to really fully go through those documents. So I just want to put that aside.
Okay.
But overall, my team is looking at the form and the requirements that we've set up in those forms, telling prospective bidders or respondents what they need to provide. So they either go by language that we put in our documentation that says where you say you must do this or you must do that, and if you don't, that would be a moment where they could be deemed non-responsive if you forgot to do a check. Now it's also depending on the type of procurement. When we deal with procurement method that we call sealed bid process and subject to public bid law, there's less margin of
Sure.
communication that we can implement with the bidders to be able to remain fair and reasonable and not making the discretionary decision.
Do you keep data as to how often respondents are eliminated based on, forms not being quite right? Do you have that kind of data within your
No,
office?
we don't. We
No.
don't keep
Okay.
that.
I think that would be interesting and important to have. And let me explain why I'm bringing this up. And I see Ms. Robles here, and it has to do with an RFP for security at Lincoln Beach. And there were 2 respondents who came in, and I personally looked at their forms as well. And one of the lines it required, what is the hourly amount that you're supposed to pay, right? And then this respondent put the hourly amount, I think it was like $30 per hour, and then right underneath it had kind of a total figure of what, the contract would require, right? But because he put that total figure, it was immediately deemed unresponsive. Then you had another form, another respondent for this very same contract, where there are like 3 boxes that you had to check, and this person checked like 2 out of the 3. And because of that, this person was deemed unresponsive, and then there were no respondents at all. To me, this looked like, particularly the individual who provided even more information that was required, not just the hourly amount, but also what the potential amount of the contract would be. The fact that there wasn't a way to just call this person and say, like, hey, you don't need to put this second line in. You put in the right information. This extra information may deem you unresponsive. Like, do you want to just keep, your first information that you had in there? I mean, I think these are like minor mistakes that are kicking out bidders, and now we're ending up with, no respondents for really important contracts. So what kind of oversight do you have on staff that, can double check them to be like, wait, just call this person, have them, fill out this form correctly. I mean, what if you don't put you forget to put your name at the top of the line, but you have everything else right? You're not going to call this person and be like, hey, you forgot to put your name at the top. I mean, these are minor little mistakes that are kicking out potentially good businesses that are responding to contracts with the city, and to me, it just doesn't make sense.
Sure, understand.
If I may. So we've met with the team about not only that, but we met with the team since, I am new to the process, and we discussed that. Clerical errors should not disqualify
Right.
somebody who has the capacity to do the work, because what we want is competition to get the best
Absolutely.
work product for
Yes.
the city. So I asked the same question. I said, well, is there some, cursory review, just a preliminary review before submittal that we could do just to double check? They did explain to me bid law and not appearing to be preferential. But I said, if it happens to everyone, it's not preferential
Right.
at that point. So we are working with the law department to make sure that we adhere to and are in compliance with bid law. But we talked about a checklist. I said the exact same thing. Can we call? I mean, this is small.
Yeah,
It has
right.
no bearing on the capacity
Totally.
of the company
Right.
or the services that they could provide. This is a small thing that should not disqualify. But, we want to make sure we're in compliance, that we're not appearing to show preferential treatment to one over the other. Because those two issues were similar but different, right? So we want to make sure that we clearly communicate to the respondent what total means.
Yeah.
So if it was to put hourly, rate in parentheses next to the total, because total means something different to
Sure.
each of us.
Absolutely.
So I think if we speak in layman's terms, clear terms, because what I expressed to the team was, you work with this every day. People, our external customers do not.
Right.
So they may not understand the expectation. We have to be very plain in what we expect from them. So we talked about that, how we clear that up, make it plain language so that they understand exactly what we expect from them.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I definitely understand that it's like, if you're working there and you're like, okay, this is wrong, and I'm supposed to, because this is wrong, I'm supposed to put it in the you didn't respond right pile. And then you look at the next one, you're like, well, you didn't check that box, so I'm supposed to, as my job, put it in the you didn't respond right pile. So I'm sure these employees are thinking that they're doing everything right, but at the end of the day, to your point, these are small clerical errors, and not having respondents to important contracts at the end of the day is a big burden on this city. And then it also sends like a very bizarre message to, people who are trying to get business with the
Right.
city. And then they see it's like, wow, I got kicked out just because of this very minor error. And then Sharon's having to go scramble and try to figure out, like, well, how the heck am I going to get security to these particular sites? And then you're having another contractor having to take up this work, but they didn't put in an RFP for this initial contract, and everything looks weird. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And so that's why I think that's so important, and the communication for minor errors like this should be made. We're seeing, and it's not just, your department, we're seeing the same thing with, for example, invoices being put into brass. When there are invoices that have something that is wrong with them and they're not able to be inputted into brass, oftentimes departments don't let the vendor know that, by the way, your invoice isn't in brass. So the vendor is waiting, to get their check. 3 months later, they don't have their check. They call, and they're like, well, your stuff's not in brass. But nobody let them know that there was a little clerical error, that there was a little something wrong with their invoice, and that's why they weren't in brass or getting paid. So it's not, I don't want to just put this on you all, but it's like we are seeing this in many different areas of city operations, this kind of lack of communication when there are minor things wrong that could be corrected with just a phone call to make working and doing business with the city a lot easier and a lot better.
I agree with you. We are in the process of working with our current technology to do just that. There are some functions that we have not turned on because we did not know the full extent or the capacity of the system. We're learning that as we go. So we have an opportunity to do notification. It's almost exception notification. If it kicks out, it immediately sends a message to both the department and the vendor. Now, we may have to dig into what the exception is, but
Yeah.
it at least notifies you that there's a problem.
Yeah.
So we have expanded, the technology that we're using, and turning on all the buttons.
Yeah, good.
Okay, so we're learning as we go that the system is robust and there is opportunity to use those exact mechanisms to cure that problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, and to that point, is there a place where if something has a problem and then there's a notification internally, so that way you all are notified, somebody can fix that clerical error?
Well, anyone, now on the procurement side, we are developing standard operating procedures so that this type thing does not happen. My question was, can we automate it?
Right,
Right? So if it's no longer a manual process, is it something that we can now automate, have someone check a box
right.
in the system? And if you do not check that box, many of us fill out, forms online. If it's a required field, you can't go past that until you address the issue.
You want to say something, Frida?
Yes.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Frida Richardson Taylor, Deputy Director of Finance. You did bring up the invoices and notifications, and I
Yes.
wanted you to know that we do have notifications that go out.
Okay,
Currently, we have notifications to go out to the department managers. Every time an invoice is submitted through BRASS, they get an email once a week. 2 weeks ago, when all of this came about, I asked Mike Schmidt, who's our BRASS administrator, to beef up that communication. And so now they're going to get daily reminders. We've turned that on.
good.
You're going to get daily reminders, and we also added the requesters, because when you need a receiver input into the system, that's not the department manager. That's the receiver that's in your department. So that may be the clerical person, who's ever that person who requests a requisition. So we have added them to the email notification, and they get it daily as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're
That's very helpful. I guess this is what I've sort of mentioned to the CAO before, is it just seems like there needs to be somebody, I don't know if that lives in the CAO's office, CFO's office, who kind of stays on top of each part of the process to make sure it's where it needs to be. And so I know, if you're a department head, in fairness, you're trying to run a department, you got HR issues to worry about, you have all of your ordinary things, there's always emergencies, welcome to a 300-year-old city, and things that are just happening. So I can see where, is there a point where this needs to be nudged from department head to procurement? Has procurement been told this contract that is coming? The contract's been in procurement, and I'm not trying to use you as a bad example. Procurement has now had it for 90 days. All right, is it time now to do it? It's in law. Law's had it for 120 days. And just so I'm just trying to get to really, I realize everybody talks to one another, but it seems like if there is a central sort of spot of how we are making sure that it moves through each part of the process, that would be really important.
So are you
And then I'll get to Councilmember Thomas. Go ahead.
suggesting a contract manager?
Yes.
So what we've done, and I think it's appropriate to mention now, we've initiated a pilot program where we do have a procurement employee directly assigned to a department.
Okay.
We've started that pilot program, I think, in November with OCD.
Okay.
So that person works solely with OCD to make sure that that happens. We've gotten very positive feedback on that, and we look to expand that program, but it talks about capacity.
Right.
So that is one example, but you're talking about oversight, right?
Well, I think it's both. I think it's both. Really, is you need a person. You need like, it's just, look. We have our level of responsibility, and then what happens. And so, what I want to make sure is Department A has gotten money, and that it's just trying to move through as quickly as possible. And to your point, if you have a contract manager whose job it is to say, all right, like, I need to get this off the director's desk, and then it needs to go to procurement. It's been in procurement for a little too long. Now I need to nudge Julian's office. Well, now I need to nudge law department. Now I need to do this. I mean, I think all of that, and then on top of that, I think to Council Member Moreno's point is to have data about, does a contract take 180 days from allocation to award? What is a normal time frame on average, number one? If there's excesses, number two, why? And then number three, where along the line can we streamline certain things? And one of the things the CEO has written about, because we've requested, is can we have just stock CEAs? Are there certain documents that are very easily plug and play and just replace certain things? If they're labeled more easily, like the lettering, I have no idea how it makes sense. So all of these things that can facilitate and make sure the necessary processes are in place so we're doing the right thing, but to make sure they're going quickly enough.
Right. So what we've done in the recent days is reach out to our regional partners to see how they do it.
Right.
Right. This is not new.
Yeah.
We do similar things in municipal government. So we've reached out to similar sized jurisdictions just to talk about it, because we'd like to know exactly how they do it and how we parallel with them. They're bound by the same bid law.
Right.
So, we could get some recommendations just to a fresh perspective on, because we're so close to it, we talk to the people doing the same thing.
Right.
We've learned some things, right? So we've, what you said, standardizing contracts so that the vendor can only put in certain information without altering the document, which causes a problem for law, because now they have to go back through to make sure it's maintained the character of the document. But we've learned, and we have a few more people to talk to. We just started this. We recently had a meeting a day or so ago just to learn how, because we want to improve the process. We want to see how other folks do it and what we can implement here to increase efficiencies.
And if I may supplement what Romy's saying, is that we've been working with the Department of Property Management to release some informal bids to help them with the work that they have to do. We use those informal bids as an opportunity to make some changes to our practice. For example, we have submitted a sample response prior to deadline to show prospective bidders how you would need to fill out the proposal that we ask you to put together. We've also implemented to send a contract to the vendor once we send the award letter. Typically, that contract is sent out later in the process, and we see that is helping, like moving up the process, getting things sooner than later, so that it doesn't stop. So those are examples of how we constantly look at our process to change it, because from those, we don't have the benefits to know the issue before it comes to us.
Right.
So those responses come, that's when we see that some language is understood different ways, and we don't necessarily have the margin to be able to just call and change it. Because the law just tells us, like, once you set up a requirement, you have no choice, you can't waive it. So it's a partnership with the department, making sure that we have the correct information to put out. We can also get them to partner with a little bit more during pre-submittal conference meetings to explain what they're looking price-wise, explain the pricing sheet, explain their scope, and make sure that everything is clear. Because we just know once we get the responses, that's when we found out that there's an issue with it.
Right. Okay. Councilmember Thomas, thank you for your patience.
No, thank you. First of all, I apologize. Had to go pick up my daughter from school end of the year. She didn't go on a field trip. She decided she didn't want to be bored at school with all of her friends gone. So that duty, family, always first. We met not too long ago, have our conversations, do our work behind the scenes to try to find out what the issues are. And one of the things that I found out was, especially in some of the comments that I made, not understanding the depth of what you guys had to do. First, I want to apologize for that. It's always easy to disparage without knowing what the rules of engagement are. But what I found out in my studying my history, and I actually spent a lot of time calling people who in the past have participated in some of this stuff, because sometimes I think if you don't know where you come from, you definitely don't know where you're going. But what I found in my conversations with you guys, y'all really just doing your job. You're following the guidelines that are set up. So once I met with you guys, I took a deep dive into our history here. Went all the way back to the Carl Gauman study about the disparity. That even with the conversations around highlighting minority and black contractors, making sure local minority and African American men and women could participate, the conversations didn't meet the reality because of the process, right? And then I took a look at city council contracts, and city contracts, and how minorities, areas where they used to participate, now there's a whole list where folk don't participate over the last several years. And that in many cases, folk were just following the guidelines. And so the conclusion that I came up with, Councilmember Giarrusso, is that the people who work for us, whether it's on the administrative or the council side, they're going to follow the rules and regulations. They're going to make sure that ethically, in terms of principles, that they protect us. They're going to make sure that they close the gap on quid pro quo and what's complicit. But also, if there's a tone, the same tone Memorial had, Coleman Young, Maynard Jackson, was that you can't come to the table unless it looks right ethically, economically, and in terms of equity, that the staff people will do that too. So as I've looked at this, rather than blaming you guys who do what we outline or approve in terms of the process, why not let's create an atmosphere where, like it was in 1994 or 2002 or in the middle 2000s when African Americans participated in some of the biggest contracts in the city, why not we just set an atmosphere with our votes and with our expectations that if these areas are not met, because I can give you a speech about anything, right? But what I vote and what I approve ultimately will tell you what I stand for. I think it's time that we allow y'all to do y'all jobs, but also give you the expectations that we need to close the gap on the disparities. We need to make sure that minority vendors and contractors are notified on the front end, and that there's a process not only to engage them, but not to disqualify them for clerical errors or minor errors that can be dealt with. And then at the end of the day, if it doesn't look like what we say we want it to be, don't budget it, vote against it. Let's move forward. So I want to apologize to y'all because I think the tone has to be set, especially given the disparity that we know economically, that we talk about helping black folk, but in the last 6 or 7 years, the gap is wider, that we have to be more mindful of making sure that we support y'all efforts with policy and process in more than just conversation, but if folk ain't gonna participate, don't fund it. The expectations have to be that someone who looks like that community has to be at the table.
Absolutely. We will introduce, for the Office of Supply Diversity, we do have a new leader in charge, Ms. Shawn Charles, who's working with OSD to make sure that these programs actually are effective. The Council of the Set Aside program, we are working to make sure it is that the in theory matches the in practice so that we're able to get the project off the ground. And we have worked through, we've identified a few gaps where it kind of overlaps with the existing DBE program. But we want to make sure at the end of the day, it is effective. We want to affect change there. So we have brought the team together, and we're actually in the process of rebuilding the team because we do have a few vacancies there, but we have some really experienced people in that area that have given us some recommendations of how we move this thing forward.
Well, I want to thank my colleagues, Councilman Giarrusso and Marino and Green, for being mindful of this. But I think you just said it. You know, we can talk about theory all day, but if it doesn't play out in terms of practice
Correct.
and how it's applied, it's just theory. And especially when you can read the data center reports or the United Way reports about participation and how participation has decreased in the last several years, I think we need to go back and take a look at why did it work then? How did it work then? And how does that theory turn into practice again? So thank you all, and I want to thank my colleagues for making this important topic.
Sure. We're going to streamline the process. We don't want it to be overly cumbersome where participants get frustrated and just back away from it. We want it something to be engaging and effective. So we're working through that right now with the Office of Supply Diversity. We have a fresh set of eyes there. Ms. Charles has a background in education, higher education, so she's bringing that teaching tool to the job. And I think, you know, there's some promise working, going forward with those programs. Now, we may have to come back to the council because we've identified gaps that we don't want to be obstacles.
Right.
So we may have to tweak the ordinance. So if we do find that, we'll re-engage the council.
We're ready. I mean, look, I think the idea of having project managers, and particularly for the departments that have high volume contracts, I know you've mentioned OCD already, and I know they have a number of NOFAs, but if there's whatever the departments are that really can benefit from having project management, and then efficiencies and standardization of contracts, I don't know what you call it, Ms. Samuel, but a form, somebody, you know, these are the most frequently asked questions, and being able to link to all that, and just making it as easy as possible on people is what we're all interested in. While I have you here, I just want to ask very quickly, we just passed the Net 30 ordinance the first time. It will become effective as for the June 6th meeting. Maybe Frida's getting ready to answer this. Just want to make sure we're in good shape as that's starting to approach.
Absolutely. So what we did, actually on yesterday, I emailed all of the department heads and the requesters of the April report to get them ready for the June meeting, to let them know that when the May report comes out, so that they can be ready to, in this Net 30 ordinance, we want to thank you because it's helping finance, help the departments be accountable. And they have not been accountable to this point. It's been that finance is not making payments, right? And so this is a partnership with the departments having to ensure that they do their part so that the vendors get paid. So we did email all of them yesterday with the April report so that things that are out there that are already on that Net 30 get paid before, so that when that May report comes out, we already reached out, Tiffany reached out to Amy on your team to find out the dates that you want the reports from us by, because we're going to email the departments in between that time so they can be ready to be here at the June 11th meeting and going forward.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Green.
And thank you. This is only a comment. I just want to thank you for mentioning the Net 30 ordinance and for the fellow council members, especially our author who made that possible. Thank you.
Well, and again, it's, I know sometimes things may seem tense, but this is, we're all trying to work together.
Absolutely.
For everybody. And again, we know departments are trying to do their job, and sometimes the paperwork is the thing that becomes the hardest to do. But by just making sure we're all holding hands together,
Right.
we push things forward together. So I really appreciate it. Any other questions or comments about procurement? All right. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time here this morning. All right. I know Councilmember Moreno has asked if we could jump out of order and move from item, I guess now, 4 to item 11, so she could take that up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You all may recall that we had sent roughly $1 million to the New Orleans Health Department to help with any gaps in summer feeding programs, whether they are for kids or any other additional assistance that we need to meet the potential gaps in summer EBT. Well, NORD camps have summer feeding programs as well, and actually they would need to have the expenditure for the summer feeding, not the health department. So this is moving $200,000 over to NORD to get that done. I know Nord was looking to potentially utilize monies within their existing budget, but I'd much rather Nord spend money on Nord stuff and activities for the summer and whatever they need to do to boost Nord activities and their work than to try to take money, to try to meet this gap when we had already appropriated enough money to try to meet these gaps. So this is just, and the health department is good with this, with moving $200,000 from their budget over to Nord. That's what this does.
Councilmember Thomas.
No, ma'am, I mean, first of all, thank you. That's a great idea and a great move. Especially, I think it was the efforts, pushback that we got from council and our delegation that actually got the state to change direction on this. So if you've been following this, shout out to Speaker Henry, State Rep Jason Hughes, and members of our delegation who joined with Councilmember Marino and Councilmember Giarrusso and folk here to say, hey, hold on. And I don't think had we not had that level of pushback, they would not have diversed their action. And I think this is a very, very good appropriation, especially in light of the success and the win that we had when you talk about EBT and feeding program for kids. So a good move. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve. Seconded by Councilmember Giarrusso. All in favor? 4 yeas, no nays. And Mr. Chair, if we could put that on consent, that would be great.
You got it.
Thanks.
All right, we'll go back to the regular order. Item number 5 is a motion authorizing the City of New Orleans, the President and the Council enter an agreement between the city and SimX for VR equipment for EMS. Anybody want to move for approval on number 5? All right, so Councilmember Moreno, four yeas, no nays. Item number 6 is a motion authorizing an amendment for Share Garner to continue their work on Gordon Plaza, moved by Councilmember Green. I second. 4 yeas, no nays. All right, next item up is about amending costs for Board of Adjustment fees and to create a tiered fee structure for applications based on land use categories. Good morning, how are you doing? Ms. Berg.
Thank you. I believe Bob Rivers and Emily Hernandez are also joining us, but I can start.
Yes, please.
So this was part of, this started in 2019, this process to amend the BZA fees. The City of New Orleans released a petition for innovative ideas through the city's newly implemented Innovation Stipend Program. In response, we submitted a common sense amendment to the Board of Zoning Adjustment for BZA fee structure for variance applications. BZA fees have not been updated since 2009 and do not cover public notice fees or the required staff time. In January 2021, we were notified that the innovative idea submitted was one of 5 ideas selected for the Innovation Stipend Program. 3 years later, we are before you presenting our case for thoughtful and necessary amendments to the BZA applications fee structure. This proposed amendment, I think it is on a roll. So I'll just keep going. The proposed amendment not only better accounts for staff time and department resources associated with processing and reviewing BZA requests, but also better aligns fees and fee categories to other application types that come through our department. Specifically, creating a tiered fee structure accounts for different levels of impact a project can have based on use and floor area. Expansion of fee categories also reflects a diversity of requests received. As depicted in the slide, BZA applications currently cost either $150 or $250 to file. The current fee for single and 2-family dwellings to file a variance application is $150. All other uses are subject to a $250 variance applicant filing fee. application filing fee. For context, this means a large commercial structure, such as a hotel, pays the same $250 fee as a 3-family dwelling. This slide also shows the fee to file applications appealing Department of Safety and Permits zoning decisions, which is a separate application type. There are several issues with the existing fees. When adjusted for inflation, the fees already fall short. Moreover, existing fees often don't cover the cost of required public notice. The agenda items for each BZA meeting must be advertised at least 3 times in the Advocate. In addition, each request requires mail notice of either a 300 or 600-foot radius to surrounding properties from the subject site. The costs associated with mailed notice in particular is based on the number of property owners and occupants within the radius multiplied by 53 cents. Due to this, the cost ranges. For the May BZA meeting, for example, the cost of mail notice for a single request was almost $250. Costs generally range from approximately $40 to $500 and beyond. In addition to the notice costs, staff time and department resources should be factored into overall application fees. Staff time dedicated to reviewing applications for completeness, analyzing plans, writing staff reports, reviewing staff reports, and closing out approved cases vary substantially per request depending on complexity. For comparison, land use applications range in costs from $500 to $4,640. The different costs are aligned with the potential impacts of the requests. In our proposal to adjust the BZA application fees, we utilize the tiered land use application fees that are based on the structure's square footage. The proposed fees are far below the cost to request a conditional use, zoning change, or a text amendment, yet the notice fees and staff time can be similar.
Good morning. We propose creating new fee categories for Board of Zoning Adjustments applications, as well as increasing fees in most cases. Recognizing that variance requests pertaining to single and 2-family dwellings typically require less staff time and often have lower notice costs and less impact, we propose increasing the fee from $150 to $250, an increase of just $100 not accounting for inflation. For similar reasons, we do not propose to increase the application fee for small multifamily developments, projects between 3 and 6 units, which would remain $250. The threshold differentiating small multifamily from large multifamily is informed by the precedent found in Article 23(3)A of the Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance that triggers a landscaping plan for multifamily developments with over 6 dwelling units. This recognizes that multifamily developments of 7 or more units have greater impacts on surrounding areas. Although the zoning ordinance technically defines a 3-unit multifamily development the same as a 100-unit one, the impacts of these 2 types of developments are certainly not the same, nor is the associated staff review time. Lastly, larger multifamily dwellings are typically located in higher density areas, which results in a higher mailed notice cost. For that reason, we propose an application fee of $750, an increase of $500. As far as proposed fees for non-residential and mixed-use developments, we created a tiered structure based on floor area, which is also how conditional use application fees are structured. The Comprehensive Zoning Ordinance also supports these thresholds. In a number of zoning districts, including the historic urban, several suburban, non-residential districts, commercial uses under 5,000 square feet are permitted by right, while conditional use approval is required for commercial uses over 5,000 square feet, which recognizes the higher impacts of larger developments. We propose an application fee of $300 for commercial and mixed-use developments under 5,000 square feet, an increase of $50, and a fee of $750 for those 5,000 square feet and above, an increase of $500. For non-residential or mixed uses 25,000 square feet and up, we have also aligned the square footage threshold with conditional use applications. Additionally, structures of this size trigger the greater mailed notice requirement, which can cost substantially more, as previously explained. There are also a number of scenarios where it makes sense to carve out new application subtypes. Variance applications for accessory structures, signs, and lot dimensions typically require less work than variances pertaining to the main structure or use. This can include circumstances where a non-residential use is seeking variances for sign size. Though the mailed notice requirement would be the same, the staff time for these types of requests is less. Lots proposing a re-subdivision that in turn would trigger the need for variances were previously required to submit separate variance applications for each lot needing variances. We've recently changed our policy to consider all lots associated with a subdivision as one variance application. Due to this, we propose using the base fee. For example, if the site is small multifamily, the base fee would be $250 plus $25 per proposed lot. So if 4 of the proposed lots needed variances, that would be $100 for a total of $350. Extension requests, where an applicant is unable to finalize an approved variance by their deadline, do not currently have any associated fees. For administrative extension requests, we propose a $100 fee, which aligns with the costs for subdivision recertifications. For non-administrative extension requests, which go before the board at their public meeting and which require public notice, we propose a fee 50% of the original fee to account for these costs, particularly the mail notice cost and staff time. We do not propose any changes for appeals of Department of Safety and Permits decisions, which would remain $250, so as to not create barriers for aggrieved parties to appeal zoning decisions that they believe are in error. Fees for rehearings are currently the same as the original application. However, these require less staff time, so we propose a fee of 50% of the original fee. As discussed throughout this presentation, this fee adjustment would better cover the cost of processing BZA applications, including required public notice, staff time, and department resources, while ensuring that fees remain as realistic as possible, particularly for those residential uses with 6 or fewer units, and for lower impact non-residential and mixed uses, to ensure that the variance process remains accessible. It also carves out and creates new, more specific fee categories, recognizing the diversity of variance requests, that not all variance requests require the same amount of staff time and resources for review, and better aligns with the conditional use and subdivision fee structures. As you know, BZA fees have not been updated since 2009. We believe now is the appropriate time to do so, and we thank you for your time and attention. Of course, open to any questions. Thank you.
Councilmember Green.
I think that as you closed out your presentation, maybe one of the more important facts that you mentioned was that there haven't been adjustments since 2009. As a member of the Industrial Development Board, as a former member of the City Planning Commission, when I speak to developers, they don't have actually a problem with the fees that we charge, and some have said, actually, I'm surprised that certain fees are lower since there are these requirements, especially regarding notification, especially regarding special meetings and the like. So, fellow council members, I believe that sufficient thought has gone into this by the City Planning Commission and the representatives of that office, and that these fees won't be incurred by anyone other than those who are making the appeals that are here. It's not something that, you know, throughout the city taxpayers are going to feel the effects of. And I also know that developers have built in and baked into their projects cost, and with the expectation sometimes that cost will be higher than they have been in the past. So I'm just asking for approval of this ordinance to be put before the City Council. I know that there may be additional questions, but I know that significant research is going into these fees, and some of the fee increases were long overdue. And again, some of the fees stay the same. So I move for approval if there are no questions.
All right.
3 yeas, no nays, and I request that it be on the consent agenda.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Take care. All right, next up, ordinance calendar numbers 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 680. This is to appropriate State Act 170 funds to the Office of the Mayor for Family of Hope Center to support the Evening Reporting Center. It's a $100,000 transfer. I'll move for approval. Second by Councilmember Thomas. 4 yeas, no nays. Item number 9, ordinance calendar numbers 34681, 682, appropriate additional funds to OPSI to cover the increase in reserve officers working secondary details, promotional increases, etc. It's a $1.2 million increase. Moved by Councilmember Green, seconded by Councilmember Thomas. One more. 4 yeas, no nays.
My fellow council members, may I just comment on the fact that there is enthusiasm about working within the New Orleans Police Department, the reserve officers. This is an example of more officers wanting to participate, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that this council has been so supportive of our law enforcement community, especially the New Orleans Police Department. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last two voting items. Number 10, calendar numbers 34683, 684, transfers $200,000 from Intergovernmental Revenue, Department of Labor, to Workforce Investment to help provide career and service training in Orleans Parish. I'll move for approval. Second by Councilmember Green. One more. 4 yeas, no nays. And then the last one is item number 12, calendar number 34691, transfers $237,000 and some change from intergovernmental revenue to termite control and mosquito control. All right, moved, seconded. 4 yeas, no nays, and I just ask that all these items go on the consent agenda. And then that leaves us with the usual reports at the end. Uh-oh, we locked out?
Yeah, I got locked out somehow.
Oop. Done. Thank you. There we go.
All right, good morning.
Morning.
Okay. As far as revenues are concerned, just a couple of notes. This morning we had 169.6 million in property tax receipts, and that all hasn't been posted to brass yet, but that's how much we have. That's 90% of the forecast, so we're definitely on the right track. The rest of it should come in over the rest of the year. One thing that has kind of come onto our radar in the past couple of days is, well, let me direct you to item 5.2, red light signal and camera enforcement. That's of course speed traps around school zones and in other places that are enforced by automatic cameras. So there is currently a bill in Louisiana legislature. It's passed through House and Senate. It's on the governor's desk waiting to be signed, as far as I can tell. What that does is it mandates that all of those revenues that we collect there must be directed either towards or distributed amongst the school board and SWB. So that means that's not going to be in general fund anymore. Annually, that generates between $15 and $20 million for the general fund. That creates that hole. And let's just put that in context. That is one entire month of all sales tax collections, equivalent. So that would be the result if that bill were to actually be signed. So that's obviously going to create a problem for this year's, for 2024 revenues. And if it's implemented, 2025 will have that included in its forecast.
Good.
So that's obviously something we're looking at very closely. Then another item in intergovernmental revenues, state Medicaid reimbursement payments. That's a quarterly payment that goes directly from the state to the health department, and then the health department transfers it over into general fund. I've been trying to track down where that payment is. Obviously, it hasn't posted to Brass yet, so we're still trying to track that one down. And then that's all I have related to revenues. But while I have your attention, I just wanted to give you a couple of macroeconomic statistics. Inflation, obviously, still a big problem. It went down, the rate of inflation went down 0.1% in March, and it's essentially unchanged from April levels of inflation. So we're talking a lot in the budget committee about how we feel like we're spending all this money, but might not be getting what we thought we were going to get. That has to be part of every conversation in that context. So that's enough for my spiel today, so I'll pass it over to Brandy.
Thank you. Mr. Large?
Yep. So some slight changes for personnel projections, and we'll see some better numbers for April. This is still from March data, when we still may have had some 2023 data involved, and we've also done some work to streamline some of our projection, some of the methodology. So we'll see some updates for next month. And we also, which we're not going to see here, I'm just talking about the changes. If you have specific questions, please let me know. We're also trying to do a better job of looking at some of the terminal leave. So we see some changes with terminal leave. We did a review this week on several different agencies. Well, we'll have to account for that in their budget as well. Some things that is often hard to predict. Are there any specific questions regarding this report?
Councilmember Green?
No, but I would just like to say that the last report showed that there were 362 vacancies in the city, and now there are 291. So a good number of people got hired over the last month, and that's good news. So to those who are wondering, yes, you can get hired by the city of New Orleans, and we have 291 vacancies. Go to NOLA.gov/jobs, and there's a potential for you to be hired. Thank you.
That is true. Thank you. Any questions with the operating report?
No, I want to follow up on Councilmember Green. Everyone knows Councilmember Green is our designated human resources employment opportunity, and thank him for doing that, because I think we now see movement. But everywhere I go, I'm meeting people who say they applied for a job with the city but didn't get it. I've actually recommended a few people through different departments, and they weren't successful. I don't want to get into whatever those issues, but if the jobs are available, I think we have to continue to not only screen people, but there's still a lot of folk out there who said they would like to work for the city. They've applied, they've submitted their resumes, and it hasn't happened. So I know of a couple people specifically who've gotten good jobs since, but they really wanted to work for the city. So I don't know what the increased efforts have to be, or what the city has to do to streamline the process. But if we need those positions filled, I think we need to find a way to get it done expeditiously.
Okay. Is there anything in the operating expenses or the FTE report?
Yeah, well, I'll
really
just
of note?
highlight, one of our departments is showing that there's a deficit, and that's not a true deficit.
Okay.
You all are aware that we have the special fund 1183 for multi-year projects.
Right.
And so there were just some distribution errors, and we're working with that department to correct those, but that's not, I just want to make sure you all know that's not a true error.
Not
The
a
numbers
true-
actually come down,
Okay.
and I have a meeting with them tomorrow, so
Okay.
our office and finance have been working very closely with them to get those errors corrected currently. So that's the biggest thing I would point out from the other operating report.
Okay. All right. Council members, anything else? I mean, we're still early in the year. Are there any sales tax or other issues, Mr. Cooper? I mean, I know we have REC coming up, so I don't want to steal any of your thunder as that's coming, but anything just we should be looking at as a headline?
Well, no, other than what I mentioned, those are the big priorities on my plate, those two issues. Sales tax seems to be performing as expected. I mean, sales tax seems to be moving exactly as we expected. We're doing fine on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We appreciate your being here. Thank you all very much.
Yep.
Hope everybody has a great Memorial Day weekend. Councilmember Green loves to move to adjourn. Second by Councilmember Thomas. 3 yeas, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Councilman?